Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining me here today. We are going to start with some opening prayers. There's a link to the opening prayers in the description of this video. And we're going to say these in Tibetan, but you are welcome to say them in English if that's more comfortable for you. The first prayer we'll say 3 times, and the next ones we'll say 1 time each. Organ yogi numjan sampemage sa dompola yatsen chogi ngorubne pemajong jesurak kordu kandra mangpokor katki jesu dak druki jinji lopchi ashek suso guru pema city home. Organ yogi numjan sam pemage sa dompola yatsen chogi ngorupne pemajong jesu drag kordu kandra mangpokor ketki jesu dak druki jinji lopchi ashek suso guru pema city home. Organ yogi numjan sam pemage sa dompola yatsen chogi ngorupne pemajong jesu drag kordu kandra mangpokor ketki jesu dak druki jinji lopchi ashek suso guru pema city home. And continuing on. Kunzando sem karab shiri sing pema karaji pani shunga sozo nimna tatenga taso katela manam la sovadem. Ogmen choki yinki pojana dosum sange kungi ngowonyet rangsem chokung untun tongzepe tawe la manam la sovadem. Sashi pochu chu ching me do tram re rab ning shi ni de gen badi sange zing do mik de po wai droku nam da jing la cho par shok tram guru ratna mandala putsa mega samudra saparana samaya hom. Semchen nam ki sampadang lohi je jag jitawar je chon to monte pai chuki korlo kordu som. Venerable teachers, whose compassion is infinite knowledge, should all I prostrate myself before the Buddhas, the teachers, bless me that I may explain definitively my whatever found yet clear and easy to understand the narrative words of my perfect teacher. All right. So let's start with a brief meditation to stabilize our minds. So start by taking a moment to remember your compassionate intention for being here today. We are here so that we can learn how to stabilize our minds and use the Buddha's teachings to remove our delusion and allow us to be of greater benefit, of the utmost benefit to all beings. So let's just take a moment to remember our compassionate intention. All right. Now we'll start the meditation. Meditation is the natural state of mind when it is relaxed, stable, and open. We often think of meditating as something that we're doing that's different from our normal experience. But this is actually our natural state of mind when the mind is relaxed and stable and open. And meditating in this way trains our mind to be calm and relaxed, but also alert and wakeful. The point of meditation is to create space in our minds. When we have space in our mind, we have more room to balance our emotions, and we have time between action and reaction. And also, having this space in our mind is the first step in developing the bodhicitta, which is the compassionate wish to free all sentient beings from suffering. If we don't have that space in our mind, there's no room for our minds to give rise to that compassionate wish. So the first thing we really have to do is start by opening some space in our minds. So take a comfortable seat and place your hands in your lap, either on your just on your legs, or you can put your right hand over your left hand with your thumbs touching and place them gently below your navel. And check in with your posture. Make sure that your spine is straight, your shoulders are open, your elbows are out a bit so your rib cage is open, and your eyes will remain open, looking gently down, kind of at like a 45-degree angle. You can imagine a line going down the bridge of your nose, down to the ground, and just find a place along that imaginary line to rest your eyes, somewhere in that middle distance. Somewhere where you can comfortably rest your gaze. And then we're going to place the tip of our tongues right behind our front teeth. So our eyes are open, slightly down, back is straight, tongue gently behind the front teeth. And allow yourself to breathe normally. If you need to take a deep breath and let it out, that's okay, you can do that. And then allow yourself to just settle into your normal rhythm of breath. We're going to put a very light attention on our breathing. Don't try to control it at all. Just breathe naturally, with the most gossamer thin attention on the surface of your breath. It's like taking your pulse. You don't put any pressure on it, just observe it. Your attention is like a feather gently riding on the surface of your breath. And when thoughts come up, just let them go, like they're bubbles popping on the surface of a pond. Let them pop. You don't need to look and see what they are. Your meditation is not lost by hearing your thoughts, but by following them down the road. So when you find yourself following a thought, just drop it. Just let it pop and return to your breath. No matter what distractions we have during our meditation, as soon as we notice we're distracted, drop it and return to your breath. Drop it, return to your breath. Returning again and again to that gossamer thin attention on the surface of your breath. We'll meditate for 5 minutes. So today I'd like to talk about how to contemplate and how to rest the mind. Contemplation is one of the 10 virtuous activities, and it's essential to deepening our understanding of the teachings. So we're not just parrots, we really get it in our hearts. The first thing one does on the path is contemplate the four thoughts that turn the mind: precious human rebirth, permanence, karma, and the faults of cyclic existence. And there are many things that we contemplate on the path of Dharma. We contemplate the nature of self. We contemplate the nature of mind. We contemplate, so many different aspects of the Buddhist teachings, just the details of karma. We contemplate our doubts. We contemplate, all of the things that we're told by the Buddha and the teachers. We're not expected to just take them at face value. We're expected to really contemplate them to our own understanding of them. The Buddha said to test his words like gold. Don't just say like, okay, well, you said so I'll believe that. We're supposed to really take what we're hearing, what we're reading, and contemplate it, and put some of our own effort into this to really merge that understanding with our minds. When I first started Nundro, the preliminary practices, I remember thinking when we got to the contemplation portion of the practice, what am I supposed to be thinking here? What's the script? Am I doing this right? And I've heard many other people ask the same questions. In the last class and in other past classes, we've alternated periods of contemplation with periods of relaxation, doing this particular meditation in which we contemplate for a bit, then rest the mind, then contemplate, rest. And after the last class, my husband asked me those same questions. How are you supposed to contemplate? Exactly. Like exactly how are you supposed to do this? What exactly are you supposed to think? And how do you switch from contemplation to rest? So I think a lot of people have these questions. So if you have these questions, you're not alone. I think many people assume that the course of contemplation must be prescribed, that there's some secret script out there. Certain sentences you're supposed to think, a particular grammar, that it's like an essay, and if you're not eloquent enough, someone is going to put a big red F at the top of your paper. And so they're afraid to try, right? They feel like they're going to get it wrong. There's no need to be so afraid. There's actually a lot more freedom than that. But of course, that also means it requires more personal responsibility. The realization is not a script that someone else hands you to recite. Realization blooms from within and is cultivated by personally tilling the soil of your own mind, personally seeking out the wisdom water of Dharma to saturate that soil, personally using the teachings of what to accept and what to reject as windbreaks to protect your fragile sprouts, personally tending to them until they flower into enlightenment. Our teachers can give us tools and tell us how to use them, but we have to be willing to get our hands dirty. The field of our mind belongs to no one but ourselves. And so it's up to us to find and dig up the rocks. It's up to us to learn the terrain and lay the irrigation lines. And it's up to us to harvest our own crop. So today I'll talk a bit about how to use the tools of contemplating and resting the mind, and hopefully this will clarify some points for folks. So Chagda Tuku Rinpoche says, "The root of all difficulty and conflict lies in the mind. Therefore, the solution to all difficulty and conflict lies in changing the mind." We change our mind by practicing meditation. And there are many ways to meditate, many ways to meditate, and they have, and each way of meditation has a different effect, a different purpose. But before we can talk about changing the mind, we must first ask, what is the mind? What is this mind that we are trying to change? Our mind gives rise to the experiences of happiness and suffering, the ability to help and to harm. But what is it exactly? and we search for the mind, we discover that the mind has no substance. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't taste it. Through karma, the mind is joined with the physical body, which then produces the experience of birth, aging, and death. So our mind is not our body, but the mind has a habit of embodiment. So it creates a body for itself in both the dream world and the daytime world. The body is like a shell in which the mind dwells. And after death, when the mind is freed from the shell of the physical body, it inhabits a mental body in the intermediate state, then another body in our next lifetime. It continues with that habit of embodiment. But if we look in our body, we can't point to any point in our body where the mind actually resides. We might think that the mind is in our brain. Well, where in your brain? Is your mind in your amygdala? Is it in your prefrontal cortex? Is it in, I don't know, the hippocampus? Where exactly? What specific cell is it in there? It's not there. Anywhere that you look for the mind, you can't find it. Untitled Chapter Rinpoche says, the mind itself is beyond birth and death. It is a continuum. It is not born. It does not age or die. If we try to describe mind, we discover that it has no color, shape, or size. If we try to locate it, we can find no place where it abides. So we cannot say that mind exists because it escapes our rational investigation. Yet we cannot say that it does not exist because it is the very source of these observations, as well as of our entire experience of reality. In this way, it becomes apparent that our limited intellect simply cannot fathom the mind. The ordinary mind constantly changes. It's filled with positive and negative thoughts and emotions, which churn endlessly, continuously influenced by external phenomena. Whether we're happy or sad, we're up, we're down, it depends on our circumstances. I'm sure you've had it where you think, like, boy, tomorrow's going to be a great day. And then you wake up in the morning and it's cloudy and raining and you're like, I don't have any energy. I'm down in the dumps. It's a cloudy, gray day. And it's just dependent upon circumstances. Or you haven't eaten lunch and so you're grouchy. Or you're, something, all of the many things that happen in our lives. Someone we don't like says hello to us and we're in a bad mood. Someone we like says hello to us and we're overjoyed. But we have all of these ups and downs, these continuous waves of positive and negative thoughts and emotions churning. And we're at the mercy of these external phenomena and circumstances. And that creates, our experience. Because our experience is so dependent on those circumstances, we can say that the ordinary mind lacks freedom. It's not choosing its experience for itself. It is purely in reaction mode. It's at the mercy of whatever happens. And if we had a penny for every thought that arose in the mind, we would be richer than all of the billionaires of the world combined. But if we examine the stream of thought in all of its abundance, we won't find a place where that stream of thought dwells. We can't point to it. Chagatuku Rinpoche says, the space between one thought and the next, and ultimately the essence of thought itself, is timeless and insubstantial. Just as the sky is unchanged by rainbows, clouds, or lightning, the true nature of mind remains unaffected by the fluctuations of ordinary mind. Mind's nature is the foundation of the unceasing thoughts and emotions of the conceptual mind, just as the ocean is the source of the constant movement of waves arising and subsiding. In the same way that waves rise from the ocean, yet are not separate from it, the ordinary mind is not separate from its nature. This is some big stuff, so I want to sit with that for a minute. The two metaphors in that quote from Chagdud Rinpoche that are both, I think, extremely helpful for understanding what we're talking about when we talk about the difference between the nature of mind and the ordinary mind. So we have the metaphor of the sky being like the nature of mind, unchanged by the turbulence of clouds or lightning or storms that pass through it. Even if, if we look out and it's a cloudy day or it's a sunny day, the sky is unchanged. The clouds exist within the space of the sky. The storms come and go within the space of the sky. But the nature of the sky itself is unchanged, no matter what inhabits that space, that sky space. And then this metaphor of the ocean, that the ocean is the source of the constant movement of waves arising and subsiding. And if we look at the surface of the ocean, of like choppy waves, and you see the light sparkling on the cresting waves, on each of their little wave points, you see the froth, you see all of this detail and movement and turbulence, and all of those waves, though, are not separate from the ocean, from the vast ocean. And the ordinary mind is not separate. In that same way, the ordinary mind is not separate from the ocean-like nature of mind. It's a display. It's the display part that we see. But it's not separate. So our true nature is always present, but the dualistic conceptual mind is a loudmouth show-off that steals the scene and puts on this big production about its needs and wants and attachments and aversions. And these attachments and aversions are the poisons of hatred, greed, and ignorance. These poisons obscure our true nature, like ink and water, but our true nature never actually changes. If you could filter out that ink, you'd see the water is unchanged. But with the ink in it, the water looks blue or red or whatever color of food dye you're putting in there. So even though the true nature of this water doesn't actually change, we're distracted from seeing it because of the ink, because the ink has changed its appearance. So everything that we experience is the projection of this ordinary mind through the filter of our poisons. And this vast array of illusory experience, this vast array of illusory appearances arises inseparably from mind itself. Just like the waves in the ocean. Chagdud Rinpoche says, the true nature of the whole drama of subject-object experience lies beyond extremes. We cannot say that we are all one. If that were true, when one person found happiness, we would all be happy. Or when one of us attained enlightenment, we would all become enlightened. Nor can we affirm that everything is separate and distinct, because the seemingly individual components of our experience are not ultimately true or existent. They are of one taste in their absolute nature. But we are unaware of mind's true nature. We go about our daily lives in a state of unawareness of that nature. And so we are tossed about by the waves of ordinary mind. And under the influence of hope and fear, we are absorbed in an unending stream of concepts. We have this sense of impoverishment from which we suffer needlessly. Not knowing how to be happy, not knowing how to end our suffering. It's like we have mistaken the chunk of gold that is our mind for an ordinary rock. And there are many ways that we can direct our efforts to create happiness and end suffering. but only resting in the nature of mind will produce awakening. Reading about it isn't enough. We must experience it for ourselves. It's like when a child suffers from nightmares. So even if the child knows that the nightmares are only dreams, it doesn't relieve their torment. The nightmares still happen night after night, and they're still scary. The child still experiences them. If we create good karma, we will experience pleasant circumstances. And if we create bad karma, we'll have unpleasant circumstances. But either way, we're still dreaming. Whether good or bad, we're still dreaming. Good dreams are better than nightmares, and it's easier to engage in virtuous actions when you're in the midst of a good dream compared to a nightmare, but they still fall short of waking up to the full realization of our true nature. What we're really trying to do is wake up. So to do that, to wake up, the first step that we must take is to thoroughly examine and begin to uproot the causes of suffering, which are within our own mind. When we understand the predicament of sentient beings, whether they're in pain at this very moment or whether they're sowing the seeds of future misery, when we understand their predicament, our love and compassion naturally increase. And this love and compassion then leads us to establish a firm commitment to train our mind through meditation so that we can fully reveal mind's true nature and free others from delusion. So the mind is like a television's remote control. If we know how to use the remote, if we know how to change the channels, we can change the picture on the television, right? In our experience, cyclic existence, which is the cycle of birth and death and the six realms where a being will go through based on their own karma, take birth in one lifetime after another, in various forms of existence, whether human or animal or hungry ghost or jealous god. We take birth again and again and again in this endless cycle of existence. And that's the wheel of existence. This goes on continuously for every being based on our karma, which is based on not understanding the nature of mind ultimately. And throughout all of these the cycle of existence, throughout all of these lifetimes, all of these various different experiences, no matter what our form looks like, no matter whether we're having pleasant or unpleasant experiences, whether we're a cat or a cockroach or a CEO, throughout all of them, mind's true nature never changes. Its essential purity is always there. At the same time, we have our failure to recognize it. Those exist simultaneously. Its essential purity and our failure to recognize it exist simultaneously. And it's like how if you have gold ore and the impurities in the gold ore exist simultaneously with the gold. If we identify with the seeming truth of the ore, we find ourselves in this dream of samsara, because that's what we're identifying with, is the impurities. But if we refine the ore, we get out that pure gold, we refine out all the impurities, and we reveal that pure gold. That's how we reveal our true nature. We have to learn to identify with that true nature rather than identifying with the impurities that obscure it. We do that through meditation, through training the mind, bringing it back repeatedly to a state of virtue or relaxation. And with diligent practice, we can reveal our inherent wisdom. It's the only way that we can break free from ignorance, which has kept us in its vice-like grip since time out of mind. And this ignorance gives rise to obscurations, and it gives rise ultimately to all of our suffering. The Tibetan word for wisdom is yeshe. The first syllable, ye, means timeless, pristine, primordial. And the second syllable, she, means knowing. So altogether, this means knowing mind's nature. So this wisdom doesn't happen in the blink of an eye, though. It doesn't happen, just overnight. Step by step, as we practice diligently, we will gain a greater understanding of this absolute truth. There are stages to this understanding. The first stage, we listen to the spiritual teachings, to new ideas with an open mind. At this point, we're not as much trying to acquire knowledge as much as we are trying to remove not knowing. So we remove the not knowing by hearing the teachings again and again and again, and we develop a new perspective. This is called the wisdom that comes from listening to the teachings. And that's just the beginning. Then we ponder what we have learned using our intellect. We call out our doubts. We ask questions. We reflect on the answers that we're given. If we don't go through this process, then we won't know what we're doing, really, right? Like we need to actually ask questions and get answers and reflect on them and put them into practice. The same way you would learn how to do anything. You can't learn how to ice skate by just listening to someone tell you how to ice skate. You have to ponder what you've learned. You have to put it into practice. You have to go back and say, hey, I tried doing this triple axel and I fell on my butt. And your teacher says, well, this is what you did wrong. And you go back and you practice more. So as we go through this process, when we use our intellect to identify our doubts, to ask questions, to reflect on the answers, and when we make that effort, we will gain clarity as to why and how to meditate. And then we can meditate one-pointedly. Extensive reflection gives rise to what's called the wisdom that comes from contemplating the teachings. This is the wisdom that resolves doubts, removes ignorance, and diminishes confusion. But that's not all. We need to go further. We can forget what we've contemplated unless we've truly integrated our theoretical conceptual understanding into our mind and heart. It can be difficult to access the insight that we have when we're sitting on our meditation cushion. It can be difficult to access that when we're sitting in rush hour traffic, or our boss is yelling at us, or our kids won't go to bed. It's difficult to access that insight in the moment. And that process of assimilation happens through meditation. That's when we're putting this into practice. So we can intellectually understand that ignorance and attachment and aversion prevent us from perceiving the intrinsic perfection of our true nature. But conceptual understanding, merely understanding this on a conceptual, intellectual level, will not produce the direct realization of that perfection. If we only listen to the teachings and contemplate, but we don't meditate, we'll never actually experience it. And we'll just stay attached and ignorant and angry. So if you want to stay attached and ignorant and angry, don't meditate. But if you want to change, if you want to change the picture on your mental TV screen, then this is what we do. We listen and we contemplate and we meditate. And through the meditation, we counteract old habits. So it's kind of like if you imagine if you have like a poster that you've rolled up very tightly and stuck in a storage closet, when you pull it out, that poster is just coiled really, really, really tight, and so you unfurl it and it just like rolls right back up, right? That habit of being all rolled up is so strong that even when you unroll it again and again, it still just rolls right back up. So our minds are like that. In that we're constantly having to work against the habits that we've accrued since time out of mind. But gradually, if we continually roll this poster backwards, we put some rocks on it to hold it down, we keep like rolling it the other way, eventually its habit will loosen and it will straighten out. So as we meditate, what we've heard becomes more obvious to us. We develop a genuine experience of the truth of these teachings that we've heard. And when we have that genuine experience, this increases our faith and our diligence in our practice, which in turn makes us want to practice more, which further increases our faith and diligence. And you get in this great flywheel of progress then. Then you really want to keep going because you've got the teachings, you can see it, they work, you put them into practice, which makes you understand them more, and you keep going. You want to go, go, go. So this threefold process of listening to the teachings, contemplating, and then meditating enables us to transform our negativity, awaken to our inherent wisdom, and reveal mind's positive qualities. And then when we're trying to serve others and difficult situations arise, we will be prepared to act appropriately. So meditation, the part when we rest the mind, that state of relaxation, that can be it's a state of relaxation that's free of thought. And that can be very difficult for beginners. It is not our normal habit at all. So if we try to force ourselves into that, we try to hold the mind really tightly and force it to do something that's not its habit, it will buck like a wild horse. So we don't want to suppress our mind. We don't want to be controlling with it. This isn't, we're not trying to beat our mind in submission here. We're actually trying to work quite skillfully with our mind and using this combination of effortful and effortless meditation or contemplation and relaxation. That's a way to work very skillfully with the natural qualities of the mind. So we allow the mind to use its natural function of conceptualization, this natural function of thinking, to engage in positive thought. And so instead of tying our mental horse on this like extremely short tether and forcing it into this teeny tiny pen where you're going to sit still and be quiet, and then it just tries to buck and run away. Instead of doing that, we built it this really nice large corral in which the horse can run freely. And this is the corral of conceptualization and contemplation. We're going to create a nice corral of virtuous thoughts in which our horse can just run freely and play. And then it will cooperate because we've given it a lot of room to play in. So when we do this, the mind experiences itself as free, but it's running within this corral of virtue. And if we don't do that, if we just try to rest the mind in a non-conceptual state, without having applied any methods to transform our habitual patterns, we won't see much change. So it's kind of like if you have if we think of our conceptualizations and the habits of our mind as being like a recorded tape, like maybe those like mixed tapes that we used to make in the 90s, right? So we've got this mixtape playing in our mind. And if we push the pause button, the sound will stop. And when we release the pause button, the tape will continue playing the same tune. So just because we paused and took a break from our mental habits during a resting meditation, it doesn't mean that we have erased the tape of our mind. If we actually want to change what's on the tape, we have to record a new one. And we need to engage in effortful meditation, repeatedly bringing the mind back to a spiritual topic or point of concentration, no matter how often we become distracted. So in the same way that in our meditation earlier, in our breath meditation, no matter what we got distracted with, we brought our attention back to our breath, back to that gentle attention on our breath. With contemplation, we're letting our mind run around and think, but when we get off topic, when we get distracted, we bring ourselves back to that point of virtue, that spiritual topic, or that point of concentration. We bring our mind back in that same way. Just keep bringing it back. So contemplation is one method of effortful meditation. When we repeatedly contemplate the teachings, we are imprinting them on the tape of the mind. And then when we press the pause button, we relax and we release it, what we hear is not that old mixtape of all our old conceptual habits. Because we've had these contemplations, we've been recording a new tape. When we press the pause button and then release it, what we hear is going to be a different song. Contemplation has the power to change the patterns of our mind. It replaces our negative habits with virtuous thoughts. And there are so many ways. There's so many ways to contemplate. So many ways to contemplate. And this is where I think, there really does, I think it's one of those things where it's so vague, it's like, just think about it. And so people get very worried that they're thinking wrong. They're contemplating it wrong. The only way you can really contemplate it wrong, I think, is to not really to not get in there, to be lazy and kind of stay on the surface. But if you cultivate curiosity and you really want to get to the bottom of this contemplation, I think that drives you forward. I think then you'll do fine at contemplating. It's like if you think of all of these people who have contemplated things throughout history, like scientists, think of some scientists who wanted to invent something, they find some problem and they're why does the food go bad? How on earth does mold appear on food? Some scientist decided to set out and figure that out. And he thought about it. He thought about it a lot, and he said experiments, and he thought about it some more. And then he tested his understanding. He set up more experiments and said, is my theory correct? And he set up more experiments, but thought about some more, if you really want to figure something out, you will think about it, and you'll think about it from different angles, and you'll see something and it will remind you of that problem that you're trying to figure out, and so you start incorporating your experiences into this problem-solving contemplation. So we do this with ordinary things, and it's not that different to do it with the Dharma, and in the fact of the pattern of thinking. We are quite used to contemplating ordinary things. We're all used to thinking about what we want for dinner, how we're going to get it, what can I make? I've got a party to go to. I've got to make a potluck meal. What can I make with it? And worrying about it and thinking about it. We've got plenty of experience conceptualizing. We are very skilled at conceptualizing and thinking. And we have to go over our fear that we're doing this wrong. So what are some ways we can contemplate? We can contemplate the teachings in light of our own experience hundreds of times throughout the day, no matter what we're doing. When we are walking, when we're talking, when we're eating, when we're driving, when we're pooping, it doesn't matter. Instead of indulging in our normal counterproductive form of meditation, which is focusing repeatedly on self-centered thoughts that will only increase our suffering, instead we can focus repeatedly on how we can best be of service. We can reflect again and again on how we can best be of service. We could contemplate how we unwittingly perpetuate the causes of suffering for ourselves and for others. Another way to contemplate is to imagine difficult situations and practice responding to them. For instance, we might imagine a disagreement with someone, a sibling, a parent, a coworker, whoever, a friend. Imagine a disagreement with them. And then you could consider the short and long-term consequences of following our impulse to be nasty. Like let's say we have, like when you have a disagreement with someone, and then afterwards you wind up reflecting on it again and again, like, oh, I really wish I had said this. I really could have shown them if I had said that, or if I had done this, like, boy, I really wanted to do that. You think of all the things you could have said, and instead of thinking in that way and just chasing the emotion, we can still go back and reflect on that conversation, but instead look at that tendency to want to hurt that person, that tendency to want to get one over on them, that tendency to want to win. What is that? Where does that live in me? Where's that tendency to why do I want to win and hurt this person? This is someone that I love. This person is of the same nature as me. This person is of the same nature as Lord Buddha. Why would I want to hurt them? What is the consequences of that kind of mental pattern? What if did I say anything that hurt them? What is the consequence of that? How did that chain of reaction happen in my mind so that I had so little control over what came out of my mouth? What emotion was that led me astray from my values? And how did it carry me away? We can look and observe that whole pattern of events, not from the perspective of, I want to feel like I won in this argument, but instead feeling like, wow, this is an opportunity to examine my mental habits and look at what are the consequences of my thoughts and actions, and contemplate karma. You can contemplate how you could do better the next time. How could we generate love or compassion instead? Or you could contemplate how knowledge of karma or suffering might alter your response. And Jetsama has given teachings on how she contemplates. So let's look at some examples from her practice too. And Jetsama says, in one teaching where she was talking about one of the contemplations that she engaged in as a young 20-year-old before she knew she had found Buddhism, she was engaging in contemplations and prayer and meditation in ways that she later came to find out were straight up Mahayana Buddhism. But at the time, she didn't label them that way. She didn't know that they were Buddhist. They were coming naturally out of her own experience and mind. And so talking about this, Jetsama said, we should think like this. All sentient beings are suffering, yet they are all Buddha. How is it that the Buddha was different, that he was not suffering? The Buddha said the difference is, I am awake. Therefore, I will practice in such a way as to become awake like the Buddha. Or we can also look at the suffering of sentient beings and realize that every one of them wishes to be happy exactly like we do. We're so similar. We have different cultures and different colored skin, but we are so similar in that we all wish to be happy. And so the Buddha teaches us that in order to have happiness, we should cultivate a pure and virtuous mind with pure and virtuous deeds. So how do we engage in that kind of meditation? We should think like this. All sentient beings are suffering if they're all Buddha. Okay, so do you just sit there and say, all sentient beings are suffering if they're all Buddha? All sentient beings are suffering if they're all Buddha. All sentient beings are suffering if they're all Buddha. You could. That is one thing you could do. It might help you remember that point. But you can really dig in there and go, go sit out in your garden and look at the ants crawling around your garden and say those sentient beings are suffering and they're all Buddha. Think about the suffering that they experience. Think about the life cycle of an ant. Think about what their experience is like and what will happen to them after they die, and what are the causes that they are accruing in their ant bodies, and where do you think they'll end up after that? And how is it that these ants have the same nature as you do? And do you believe that? Do you have any doubts about that? What doubts do you have about the fact that the ant has the same nature as you do, and that nature is the same as the Buddha nature? What doubts do you have about that? Dig in there and find out. Go look at your enemy, someone who makes you really, really mad. You have this terrible argument with them. Sit down and ask yourself, how is it that I have separated myself so much from them? Like they have the same nature as I do. Where is my doubt? Where is the doubt that is preventing me from seeing that? What am I not understanding about how we have the same nature? And as you find your doubts, you can ask questions that resolve your doubt. But if you don't identify your doubts, you won't find the antidote to them. So you have to dig in there and try and find them. So what Jetsama said is that as she contemplated in this way, she realized that compassion is the only thing that makes sense. And she says, think about the logic of it. Here you are, one sentient being on our planet, where in the human realm alone, there are roughly 6 billion of us. On our planet, there are also uncountable animal forms. You can't even count the number of ants in an anthill. Each one of them is a sentient being with the Buddha nature within them, just as surely as you are, yet they appear in this form due to their own habitual tendency and the way that their consciousness is functioning. How many uncountable sentient beings can be seen with the eye on this planet alone? If this absolute Buddha nature, this ground of being, is my nature, and you are that also, and yet we appear in these multitudinous forms, wandering and suffering in samsara, it made perfect sense to me to dedicate my life to the liberation and salvation of all sentient beings. Nothing else seemed logical or reasonable. And she contemplated in these ways for 8 to 10 hours a day, just on contemplations like this, until she saw clearly for herself that compassion was the only game in town that made sense. So, and with this example that she's talking about, contemplating the, that all sentient beings are of the same nature. But again, there's many things that we can contemplate on. We can contemplate impermanence. We can contemplate, just the leaves changing on the trees, the changes of season, our own aging, how quickly our kids age or our parents age, or we can contemplate karma. We can contemplate the preciousness of our human rebirth and how rare this opportunity is and how swiftly it will disappear. We can contemplate, where is I? Where is the I that I call myself? Where is that? Where does that I live in me? There's so many things that we can contemplate. Any of the Buddhist teachings. You open up a book, you read a paragraph, contemplate it, think about it. So another way that Jetsama meditated was to contemplate best case scenarios. And she thought to herself, like, this is this absolute nature. What is this life we are living now, or we remain kind of blind to this nature? She began to really probe her life and trying to see what is the best thing this life can give me or give anyone, and what's the worst? And she began to examine all of the different scenarios associated with ordinary life. And so she thought, like, so her first demand for this best case scenario, this is just dreaming, just being, just dreaming here. Her first demand was, I never get old. No aging happens in this best case scenario. Right, this is a fantasy. You're thinking best case scenario. What is the best way your life can possibly turn out here? So no one ages. That's the dream. Somehow Estee Lauder has found the secret to youth, and no one ages anymore. And then also, she contemplates that her husband is perfect too, and her kids grow up, but then of course they never age past, like, I don't know, like 29 or whatever age seems right. And then, and her kid grows up to be president or maybe a doctor and then president. And at his inauguration speech, and when he wins when he gets his medical degree at both of these occasions, he says, it was my mom that made it possible. This is her fantasy. No one ages. Everything's perfect marriage, perfect kids. And her kids credit the mom for everything. And, and everything's working out great. The marriage is perfect. There's no boring days in the marriage. It's just like a television commercial, or, just absolutely perfect and romantic. Never loses that spark. And they've got the white picket fence house, 2-car garage, plenty of food. Food's delicious. She's got great style. She's got great clothes, like everything she could wish for. Okay. So then she thinks to herself, all of this happens. What's the end of the story? And she says, well, the end of the story is just like the end of any other story that you can find in the human realm. No matter what Estee Lauder does, we are going to get old because time is going to pass. She had not figured out the chemistry of time yet. So time's going to pass. The end is going to be the same. We are going to be old. We're going to, at some point, get sick, and then we're going to die. And she began to meditate on the fact that whatever comes together in samsara has to separate. Whatever comes together has to separate. That's just the nature of it. It's never been otherwise. And she said, whatever is born dies. Whatever is young gets old. It's the nature of it. And she says that she meditated on that constantly. And she would try all these other different scenarios. She tried to develop like 5 or 6 best case scenarios and gave herself total freedom. Like, I don't know, a real life prince rides up on a white horse and carries her away to some fantastic castle with her kids. They live in opulence in a castle in the clouds or something. And everybody's rich, everybody's happy, everybody's famous. And what's the end of the story? Fast forward, what's the end of the story? And she found the end result was always the same. It was always old age, sickness, and death. And she found that even if her fantasy included like a great 401k or something, and she was, she had one of those, she had like a great retirement fund, didn't matter. Then it's just like you're dying with a golf club in your hand. Okay, you're wearing a fancy gold necklace when you die. You're still dying. The end of the story is still the same. I know this sounds really delightful and fun, thinking about death, but it's really not as depressing as it sounds. Like, what Jetsama says is that contemplating this way, she did this for like 8 to 10 hours a day for a very long time. And then, it didn't make her fall out of love with anything. It didn't make her fall out of love with her children or with her life. But you get this understanding that, you can eat healthy, you can exercise all the time, you can sleep, you get all the sleep you need. And no matter what, you're still going to experience the same end result. It's still going to be samsara that we're caught in. It's still going to end the same way. So you can still enjoy your life, but it has a different quality to it because it's in perspective. So those are some examples of how we can engage in contemplation. There really is a lot of creativity to it. And then the other side is the effortless meditation. So effortful meditation produces a degree of understanding and change in the mind's habits, but it does not by itself bring enlightenment. The only thing that brings enlightenment is resting in recognition of mind's nature. So the only way to wake up is to wake up, basically. But by changing our mind's habits, we can create more conducive circumstances for that awakening. So, and for the resting part of the meditation, the verb to meditate implies effort. It makes it seem like we're going to do something. And so that's why I'm using the phrase, allow the mind to rest or relax. So it's still a form of meditation, but we're not doing something. Effortless meditation, there's no striving. The mind simply abides in a state of relaxation that allows us to know its nature. So usually when people meditate, they're trying to do something, but instead we just let the mind relax. We don't block it, don't follow it, we just let it be. And we allow our mind to rest in the spontaneously open space in which thoughts arise and subside. So remember again the metaphor at the beginning of the sky. So no matter what clouds come through, no matter what storms come through, the sky is unchanged. So we are allowing our mind to rest in that spontaneously open space that remains unchanged. No matter what thoughts arise and subside in it, that space is the same. And Chagda Rinpoche says, the ultimate point of effortless meditation is to recognize what is already there. We don't increase or improve the nature of mind by meditating, nor do we reduce or defile it by not meditating. If we could change mind's nature, it would necessarily be contrived and impermanent. But this is true only of ordinary mind. The concepts and assumptions of ordinary mind mask its true nature. When we stop engaging our emotions and thoughts of past and future, they naturally subside. By resting in a state of openness, we allow the mind to become calm and stable so that we can taste its true nature, not intellectually, but as a direct experience. At first, though, when we try this, the state of rest won't last very long. The thoughts will arise very quickly. So instead of letting those thoughts run rampant, we direct them towards a spiritual topic like compassion or karma or suffering or equanimity, whatever the topic of our contemplation is. And then when the contemplation becomes stale, we drop it and let the mind relax again. And it'll be brief. The thought will move again. So then you direct that energy back to the contemplation. When we're resting, we don't do anything special. We just let the busyness go. So when the thoughts arise, rather than suppress them, We direct them towards contemplation. We use one concept to antidote another. And then to antidote mind's habit of conceptualization altogether, we antidote that by allowing the mind to rest. So switching between the contemplation and rest, how do you make that switch? So when we're contemplating, when we're doing our contemplation, it's kind of like it's like being on the monkey bars. So as we're contemplating, we're going along the monkey bars. Monkey bar, monkey bar, monkey bar. We're going along, thinking about karma or thinking about impermanence, whatever we're thinking about. We're contemplating, we're contemplating, we're contemplating. And we're going to stay focused on that. We're staying on this track of the monkey bars. We're sticking to our topic. So we're going down the monkey bars. And then our arms get tired. Our meditation gets stale. Our contemplation gets stale. Just gets kind of stagnant. You're kind of like, doesn't have a fresh energy to it anymore. So it's kind of like your arms are getting tired on the monkey bar. So what do? You let go of the monkey bar. You just let go of it. Then what happens? You feel your feet hit the ground, right? You find yourself moving again. When you find yourself moving again, you go back to the monkey bars. You go back to contemplating, 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 contemplating. Your arms get tired. Let go. You just let go. It's nothing special. You just let go. And if you do this, as you do this over and over again, when you let go, you will be able to remain in that state of rest for longer periods of time and gain stability in that state. But at first, it will be so fast, you may not even, notice it. It may seem too fast for you to see it, but just try. It's just, you just let go. And it's like we're shifting from identifying with the thoughts, we're moving from identifying with the thoughts and with the movement of the thoughts to identifying with the space in which the movement occurs. So as we're contemplating, we are identifying with the movement. We're following the thoughts. We're thinking, we're contemplating, we're identifying with that thought movement. And then we shift identification to the space in which that movement occurs. We just let go of the movement. And in that space, when we're resting in that space, once we are able to remain in that space for some time, you'll see that is the space in which thoughts arise and subside. So you can actually stay in that space without necessarily grasping onto the thoughts that come up in that space. But once you do start grasping onto the movement, grasping onto those thought trains that come through, you'll notice that you've lost that identification with the space in which that movement occurs. And so ultimately we move to a place in our practice where we're able to maintain recognition of that nature of mind, no matter what is going on. We're able to remain in that space. But for now, we just practice, and it happens very quickly. So you just keep trying again and again. Contemplate rest, and keep trying to let go of those monkey bars, and then get back on the monkey bars, and then let them go. Get back on the monkey bars, let them go. All right. So when we contemplate without resting, it's like stirring the sediment in a pond. It gets it really stirred up. It stirs all that mud up. But on the other hand, if we rest the mind without any contemplation, it's like practicing archery without a target. So through contemplation, we cut through mental dullness and attachment to emptiness. And then we cut our attachment to concepts by letting the mind rest. And when we go back and forth, going back and forth in this way, we're neither consumed by the swirling concepts, nor are we lost in a dull or coma-like state free of thought. And this alternating back and forth keeps our contemplation fresh. It's and more wakeful. So ideally, the mind in meditation is like water tumbling down a cliff. It becomes clearer each time it hits a rock and changes direction until it reaches the bottom and it's pure. So you're doing this like series of antidotes. It's contemplation, rest, contemplation and rest. You're doing these series of antidotes that's like, the rocks that the water hits all the way down until it becomes pure. And the Buddha once had a student who said he couldn't meditate. And so the Buddha asked him what his work was. And the student was a musician. And he said, I play a stringed instrument. And so the Buddha asked, is the sound of your instrument sweet if the strings are tight? No. Is it sweet if the strings are too loose? No. So what do you do? The student said, I find a balance. That's how to meditate. Neither too tight nor too loose. So when we're beginning this meditation, it's best to devote 90% or more of our practice time to contemplating and 10% or less to letting the mind rest. And as we mature in our practice, our minds will remain alert and in a state of rest that is truly fresh for longer periods of time. But we want to keep that time short because we want to make sure that we're actually practicing rest. We're not practicing like coma, sleepiness, just checking out. We want to make sure we're practicing it right. So we keep those really brief at first. And when we contemplate, we acquire greater understanding and compassion, and we accumulate merit. And when we rest in mind's nature, we accumulate wisdom. And these two accumulations lead to the full actualization of the two facets of enlightened mind, which are the non-dual realization of the ultimate truth and the knowledge of all causes and conditions of past, present, and future. So, in the beginning, Charatuka Rinpoche says, in the beginning, hope and fear permeate our practice. We hope that we have found mind's nature, and we fear that we have not. But slowly, a seamless experience emerges that is beyond concepts of meditation and non-meditation, beyond hope and fear, and we rest effortlessly awake in the nature of mind. So, remember, compassion is beyond hope and fear. So, let's drop our fears that we have about doing this wrong and just dig in and give it a go. So we'll just do a really quick little meditation. This will take 5 minutes. We'll end at 6:30. So we'll do the same contemplation that we did last class. And between each contemplation, we'll allow the mind to rest. So just sit quietly in your meditation posture. And let's think of all of the people around the world who are dying in hospitals right now. Think of the hospitals in your own city, your own state. Think of how full they are. Think of the beings that are in them who are suffering and scared. There are old people and young people, all finding themselves helpless in the face of death. And we can expand our awareness of these beings outwards to include all of the hospitals in this country. So many beings, so many hospitals full of beings who are dying. Some of them are alone. Some of them have family. Some of them are quite aware that they're going to die and they're very afraid. Some of them are maybe in comas or otherwise incapacitated and have no idea that they will never see their families and loved ones again. And they are in a state of confusion and also afraid. You can expand that out further to the whole world. All of the people dying in hospitals all around the world. Hospitals where people have good medicine and caring doctors. Hospitals where people do not have the medicine that they need. Hospitals that are bombed out by terrorism or war. There are people in hospitals who are dying, who are afraid because maybe they are of a race or gender or nationality that is not respected by their medical providers. And so they don't trust the people taking care of them. There are people who are in pain and afraid of the pain they are experiencing. But most of all, they are afraid of letting go of everything they know and love. Hold these people in your heart. Think of their suffering. And now imagine that you're on your deathbed. You're about to lose everything that you have acquired in this life. You can't take any of it with you. Your house, your clothes, your money, your pets. Can't take anything with you. Your friends and family surround you. Think of the faces that surround you and how much you love them, how attached you are to them. No matter how much you love them, in a few moments, you will never see them again, ever. Just a letting go, like you've never let go before. You'll never see any of these people that you love again. In just a minute. Imagine the terror that you feel. And then let the mind rest. Let go. And bring your attention back to your present circumstance. You're not dying in this moment. You're healthy and alive. You're not losing the people you love. You're not starving or about to be killed. Appreciate your good fortune. Ground yourself in gratitude for your present condition. And then let your mind rest. Let go. And then resolve to do everything you can to reduce the suffering of others. What can you do to reduce the suffering of others? Resolve firmly in your heart to apply yourself to that. And then let the mind rest. Let go. And then pray that you will accomplish this. Formulate a prayer to whoever your object of refuge is, whether you are Buddhist or any other religion. Formulate a prayer that you will accomplish this. And then let the mind rest. Let go. And at the end of your practice, always remember to dedicate the merit for the benefit of all sentient beings. And we'll do that now. By this effort, may all sentient beings be free of suffering. May their minds be filled with the nectar of virtue. In this way, may all causes resulting in suffering be extinguished and only the light of compassion shine throughout all realms.